Greetings, YouTube. This is Fragments of Memory again, aka Armchair Philosopher. I was watching the Young Turks the other day, and I just found out that Obama signed off on a bill that would basically make it legal to grab someone on the suspicion of being a terrorist, and they can just detain you without any trial. They can just say, oh, you're suspected of being a terrorist. We're just going to scoop you up, and that's it. No trial, and they can hold you indefinitely. So, as I heard this makes me think back to the science fiction novels I've read in the past, in the so-called dystopian futures, where there's a powerful government, and of course, people can just be extracted from the general society and put in some prison without a trial, without even any sort of resolution. Even we grab you on suspicion and just throw you in a cell, and that's it. So I'm wondering if, in a way, that these science fiction writers was seeing the trend that was coming in our nation. Fahrenheit 451, Logan's Run, and you get the drift. So it just really intrigued me. Now, I really don't have any statistics or facts and figures, but this story was in the news today. So while we were distracted by the size of Kim Kardashian's backside, and while we were distracted by some celebrity's affair, or whether or not I can make my male member larger with a certain pill, or the healthcare debates, or even the Republican primaries, which I've already given you my 2 cents on the Republican primaries. I'm just wondering, like, this was really on the back burner. And apparently, both Republicans and Democrats in Congress agreed to this. This wasn't just a Republican thing, this wasn't a Democrat thing. This was a joint effort. This was a bipartisan decision. So, folks, just beware out there that if you are even suspected and the authorities get a hold of you, they can just throw you in some cell and that's it. And they didn't run this by the American people. They just did it. No one put this to a vote. They just, your leaders, your elected officials decided on this without your consent. Gotta love that democracy in action that we talk about so much. Now, it's also very interesting that looking at elections, and things like that, have you ever noticed that there's only two parties? You can either vote Republican or Democrat. I mean, there are other parties in existence, but the parties that seem to have the big clout are the Republican and the Democratic parties. There's no other party to contend with either party. You're either Republican or you're Democrat. So are we really electing or selecting? And I would say we're selecting. Now, I'm not trying to say that don't vote, but I am saying that how much does your vote really matter? And that's a question that I ask myself, like, does my vote really matter? Or do I get some minor choices, like, do I want chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry, but I don't get to make the huge heavy lifting decisions that's done by the so-called elected or selected officials? I mean, you have your third party people, but it seems like the third party vote is just a throwaway vote. There's no real substance to the third party. And I think the US would be served better with more than just two political parties. And it's a shame because I think there are third party people out here who have really good ideas and agendas and so forth. But unfortunately, we're only limited to the two parties. And it makes me wonder, does that make us, are we really free just because you gave us a few choices and then we could select from those choices so we're free? And again, I don't want to single out any particular political party, but it does feel like something that the late comedian Bill Hicks once said. He said, "Here's democracy, and here's politics in America." He said, and he goes, "I think the puppet on the right shares my beliefs. I think the puppet on the left is more to my liking. Wait a minute, there's one guy holding up both puppets." During the year 2000, during the presidential elections of the year 2000, there was there was a music video out, and they were showing clips from the campaign promises and speeches of both George W. Bush and Al Gore. And George W. Bush was like, "I'm for the death penalty." Then they showed another clip, and you had Al Gore going, "I'm for the death penalty." And it referred to the candidates as being two heads, but on the same beast. So it was the same beast, but he had two different heads. And that's kind of how I see the two-party system here in America. So back to this American detention thing. I think it's interesting that this detention bill was signed, voted by both Republicans and Democrats, and Obama signed it. Or Obama hasn't signed it yet. I don't know if he signed it yet. Like, I saw the Young Turks yesterday, so I don't know what happened with that. But think about it. This is under a Democratic president. This is under, and this was done by both parties. This wasn't done by one party or over the other. So it just makes me wonder, like, does our vote really matter? Are our leaders really for us? Or do they just use us for fodder when they need to get into office, and then when they're in office, they get to do whatever they want to do and set it up the way they want to set it up? And maybe that's cynicism on my part, but I do feel like, well, I do feel as though, what's the point sometimes? Now, this doesn't say I'm not going to be consciously politically conscious, because I do try to listen to political perspectives on all the spectrums. I'll watch Fox News, but I'll watch MSNBC, and I'll watch current TV, and I'll read different papers and magazines and look at different blogs to get different opinions. So, for example, if you look on my channel, you'll see that I'm subscribed to people of even different religious persuasions, even though I don't share their religious beliefs in some cases. Like, there's a Ringo for Life character on here. He's Hebrew Israelite, and there are some things he say where I'm like, that dude's on point. But there's other stuff I'd be like, I can't get behind it. I can't agree with the Hebrew Israelite theology. Um, there's another person on here who's like an evangelical Christian, and I think they give some real good tips on like eating healthy, but they thump that Bible scripture at you, and I respect the Bible, and I respect some of the teachings of the Bible, but I myself am not a Christian, so and then I have links to other things too. So, but because I at least expose myself to different perspectives, doesn't mean I subscribe to every single thing that they believe in. So, with this thing being signed, it sort of reminds me of the movie The Siege, where martial law was instituted, and Bruce Willis was this military gentleman, and because there were so many terrorist attacks in New York, that Bruce Willis's character says, "I'm interacting the Protective Powers Act," and of course, all the citizens in America, or not in America, but in New York, were put under martial law, and people were in cages on the streets of New York. And I remember just seeing clips from the movie, and just remember seeing the preview for it, and working in a movie theater when it came out. So I remember the whole controversy behind it. And I wonder, will we end up like The Siege? Will we end up in a society like Fahrenheit 451? Well, thank you for at least hearing my small rant on this. Just remember, Google it. It's the American Detention Act, and it either is a law right now, or it possibly is going to be a law. So if you're suspected of being a terrorist, you better look out. Take care. Peace.